In September 2024, a construction crew breaking ground for a luxury ski resort near Berchtesgaden, Germany, hit something unexpected 15 feet below the alpine soil. The excavator's bucket struck reinforced concrete where geological surveys had shown only rock and earth. Work supervisor Klaus Reinhardt ordered his crew to halt operations on September 18th at 14:30 hours. What they'd uncovered wasn't a natural rock formation or old foundation. It was the entrance to a bunker complex sealed with a steel door bearing manufacturing stamps from 1944. The door, corroded but intact, had been buried under soil, rock, and 79 years of accumulated forest debris. When German federal authorities and the Bavarian State Office for Monument Protection arrived on September 21st, they found something that contradicted every historical record. Behind that steel door, a descending staircase led 40 feet underground into a network of rooms carved into solid rock. The main chamber measured roughly 60 feet by 40 feet, with 6 smaller rooms branching off a central corridor. All of it was in remarkable preservation condition, sealed from the elements by German engineering and sheer luck. In the third room on the left side of the corridor, investigators found a wooden desk with a leather journal locked in its drawer. The journal was dated January 1945 through November 1952. The handwriting was precise, almost obsessive in its detail. Each entry documented daily life in the bunker, supply management, security protocols, and something that made no historical sense. The writer described maintaining the facility for 7 years after Germany's surrender, living in isolation, monitoring Allied movements, and waiting for orders that would never come. The journal's first page identified its author, Standartenführer Eric von Strauss, Waffen-SS, 2nd Panzer Division des Reich. Allied records show von Strauss was reported killed in action during the Soviet winter offensive of January 1945 near Budapest, Hungary. His death was confirmed by multiple witnesses. His body was supposedly buried in a mass grave that Soviet forces later destroyed. Except the journal in that Bavarian bunker was written in von Strauss's handwriting, confirmed through forensic comparison with his wartime documents. It documented his escape from the Eastern Front, his journey across collapsing Germany, and his self-imposed exile in an underground fortress for 7 years after the war ended. That sealed bunker proved German officers didn't just flee to South America or disappear into civilian life. Some built survival shelters in the heart of the Alps and continued living as soldiers years after their nation surrendered. If you want to see what forensic teams found inside that alpine bunker and how von Strauss survived underground for nearly a decade, hit the like button and subscribe, because the evidence recovered from that facility rewrites what we thought we knew about Nazi officers who vanished in 1945. Now back to January 1945, where von Strauss was supposedly killed during the Soviet offensive. The official record says he died leading a defensive position. The bunker journal tells a completely different story. Eric von Strauss was born in Munich on March 14, 1908, into minor Bavarian aristocracy. His family had military traditions dating back to the Napoleonic Wars. He joined the Wehrmacht in 1934, transferred to the Waffen-SS in 1939, and rose through ranks during campaigns in Poland, France, and the Eastern Front. By 1944, he held the rank of Standartenführer, roughly equivalent to colonel, commanding a battle group within the 2nd Panzer Division des Reich. His military record shows competence but not distinction. He earned an Iron Cross First Class in 1942, was wounded twice, and developed a reputation as a methodical, cautious commander who prioritized his men's survival over aggressive tactics. What made von Strauss unusual wasn't his combat record, but his engineering background. Before joining the military, he'd studied civil engineering at Technical University of Munich for 3 years. His personnel file, declassified in 1998, shows expertise in fortification construction, structural design, and logistics management, skills that made him valuable for defensive operations, but also gave him knowledge most combat officers didn't possess. He understood how to build structures that could withstand artillery bombardment, how to design ventilation systems for underground facilities, and how to calculate supply requirements for extended sieges. His engineering background had earned him assignments overseeing fortification construction in occupied France during 1943, experience that would prove critical when he decided to build his own bunker. By January 1945, von Strauss commanded approximately 800 men in a mixed battle group of tanks, infantry, and support personnel. The unit was deployed near Budapest as part of Germany's desperate attempt to hold Hungary against the Soviet winter offensive. The strategic situation in January 1945 was catastrophic for Germany. Soviet forces were advancing on all fronts. The Eastern Front was collapsing. German units were surrounded, destroyed, or in full retreat. Von Strauss's division faced overwhelming Soviet armor and infantry with dwindling supplies, no air support, and crumbling morale. On January 18, 1945, Soviet forces launched a major offensive that encircled German positions near Budapest. Von Strauss's battle group found itself cut off, surrounded by 3 Soviet divisions. Radio contact with German command was intermittent. Supply lines were severed. The situation was hopeless. According to official records and survivor testimony, von Strauss was killed on January 22, 1945, when Soviet artillery struck his command post. 2 subordinate officers reported seeing his body amid the rubble. The unit's remaining forces surrendered on January 24th. Those officers spent years in Soviet prison camps before returning to Germany in the 1950s. Their testimony was consistent. Von Strauss had died leading his men. His body was left behind during the chaotic surrender. Soviet forces reportedly buried German dead in mass graves that were later destroyed during post-war reconstruction. No remains were ever recovered. His family in Munich received official notification of his death in March 1945. His widow, Margaret von Strauss, accepted a pension as a war widow. His 2 children, Klaus and Anna, grew up believing their father had died a soldier's death. The family maintained this belief for 79 years. But Allied intelligence files from 1945 contained details that wouldn't make sense until 2024. During interrogations of captured German officers from von Strauss's division, several mentioned he'd been obsessed with survival plans during the final months of 1944. One officer recalled von Strauss discussing building deep shelters in the mountains where a man could wait out the occupation. Another officer testified that von Strauss had systematically redirected supplies, construction materials, and even gold reserves from division stockpiles during late 1944, claiming they were for defensive fortifications. No such fortifications were ever located. The interrogators noted these details but drew no conclusions. Survival obsession was common among German officers facing defeat. Supply irregularities were endemic in the chaos of 1944-45. The reports were filed and forgotten. Until September 2024, when construction workers uncovered a bunker containing 7 years of journals documenting von Strauss's life after his supposed death. January 18, 1945, 500 hours. Soviet artillery opens the winter offensive with a barrage that destroys German forward positions. Von Strauss's command post, located in a reinforced farmhouse 3 kilometers behind the front line, shakes with each explosion. Radio reports flood in. Soviet tanks are breaking through. Infantry is being overrun. The defensive line is collapsing. Von Strauss makes a decision he'd been contemplating for months. He's not going to die in Hungary for a lost cause. According to his journal discovered in 2024, Von Strauss had been preparing his escape since November 1944. He'd seen the writing on the wall. Germany would lose. Officers faced execution, imprisonment, or at best decades of occupation and humiliation. He had no intention of accepting any of those fates. Over 3 months, he'd systematically accumulated resources. Using his authority as battle group commander, he'd requisitioned supplies under pretense of fortification work. Construction materials, tools, preserved food, medical supplies, gold bullion from divisional funds, forged identity documents, and weapons. All of it had been secretly transported westward via supply trucks to a predetermined location in Bavaria. That location was a remote valley near Berchtesgaden, close to Hitler's Eagle's Nest, but isolated enough to avoid attention. Von Strauss had selected the site during a leave period in August 1944. He'd personally surveyed the terrain, identified a rock formation suitable for excavation, and hired local workers under false pretenses to begin preliminary digging, claiming it was for a military communications facility. By November 1944, the basic bunker structure was complete. A network of rooms carved 40 feet underground, reinforced with concrete, equipped with ventilation shafts disguised as natural rock crevices, and sealed with a steel door. The workers, paid generously and told the project was classified military construction, completed the work and moved on. They never knew what they'd actually built. Von Strauss had financed the construction with diverted military funds and his family's wealth. He'd visited the site 3 times during late 1944, stockpiling supplies in the underground chambers. By January 1945, the bunker contained enough food, water, fuel, and materials to sustain one person for several years. Now, with Soviet forces closing in, the time had come to use it. January 22, 1945, 1400 hours. Soviet artillery strikes von Strauss's command post. The building collapses. In the chaos, smoke, and confusion, von Strauss implements his plan. He'd arranged for a body, a German soldier killed earlier that day, to be placed in the command post wearing von Strauss's uniform jacket and identity tags. The soldier was similar height and build. In the destruction and panic, precise identification would be impossible. Von Strauss, wearing a common soldier's uniform without insignia, slips away from the command post during the confusion. He carries a small pack with essentials, forged papers identifying him as Sergeant Walter Halls, a Supply Corps NCO, civilian clothes, gold coins, and maps showing the route to Bavaria. 2 subordinate officers, Lieutenant Karl Fischer and Captain Ernst Dietrich, witness the body in von Strauss's uniform amid the rubble. They report their commander killed. They have no reason to suspect otherwise. The command post is collapsing. Soviet forces are minutes away. They retreat with surviving troops. Von Strauss moves west on foot, traveling at night, avoiding roads, and using his forged identity when necessary. Germany in January 1945 is in chaos. Millions of soldiers, refugees, and displaced persons are moving across the country. One more exhausted soldier draws no attention. He travels for 6 weeks, covering approximately 900 kilometers from Hungary to Bavaria. He hitches rides with retreating Wehrmacht columns, walks through frozen forests, sleeps in abandoned buildings, and carefully navigates Allied air patrols and checkpoints. His engineering mind planned meticulously. He'd memorized routes, cached supplies along the way during previous trips, and prepared fallback plans. By March 5, 1945, von Strauss reaches Berchtesgaden. Germany is collapsing. The Allies are advancing from west and east. Hitler's regime has weeks remaining. Von Strauss hikes into the mountains, locates his bunker entrance, unseals the steel door, and descends into the underground complex. He would remain there, hidden beneath the Bavarian Alps for the next 7 years. Allied intelligence never investigated von Strauss's death beyond accepting German reports. He wasn't accused of war crimes. His unit hadn't participated in atrocities. He was simply another German officer killed during the Soviet advance. Case closed. But declassified files from 1946 contain curious details. During interrogation of German prisoners from von Strauss's division, American intelligence officers noted financial irregularities in the unit's records. Approximately 50,000 Reichsmarks in gold, several tons of construction materials, and substantial food supplies had been requisitioned in late 1944, but never accounted for. The interrogators asked captured officers about this. The responses were vague. Von Strauss had ordered the materials for defensive positions that were never completed due to the Soviet offensive. War chaos explained the discrepancies. The investigators concluded it was likely battlefield corruption, common in collapsing armies. They filed the report and moved on. Another detail emerged in 1947. A German civilian, Heinrich Albrecht, who'd worked as a construction foreman near Berchtesgaden, mentioned to American occupation authorities that he'd supervised excavation work in 1944 for what he was told was a military communications bunker. The location was remote, the work was paid in cash, and he was instructed to forget about it after completion. American authorities investigated briefly, but the location Albrecht described was vague. He couldn't pinpoint exact coordinates. Search efforts in the heavily forested mountains found nothing. The Americans concluded it was likely a minor Wehrmacht facility destroyed or abandoned. The investigation was closed in April 1947. Von Strauss's family never doubted the official account. His widow, Margaret, corresponded with survivors from his division who confirmed his death. She received his Iron Cross and other medals from military authorities. A memorial service was held in Munich in 1946. His name was inscribed on a monument to fallen Bavarian soldiers. His children grew up with stories of their father's sacrifice. Klaus became a doctor. Anna became a teacher. Both married and had families of their own. They visited the memorial regularly and never questioned the accepted history. Meanwhile, 40 feet beneath a Bavarian mountain, their father was living in self-imposed exile, recording his daily life in meticulous journal entries and waiting for a future that would never arrive. September 18, 2024, Alpine Resort Development AG had purchased 200 acres of mountain land near Berchtesgaden for a luxury ski resort. Environmental surveys, geological assessments, and historical reviews had been completed. No significant obstacles were identified. Construction began in August 2024. Excavation supervisor Klaus Reinhardt was overseeing foundation work for the main lodge when his excavator hit something solid at 15 feet depth. The machine's bucket scraped across reinforced concrete. Reinhardt ordered work stopped and called site manager Thomas Beck. Beck examined the obstruction. It wasn't natural rock. It was man-made concrete, massive thickness, and extended laterally in both directions. He contacted the Regional Construction Authority, which dispatched an inspector on September 19th. The inspector, after examining the structure, recommended contacting the Bavarian State Office for Monument Protection. Germany has strict laws regarding historical sites. Unexploded ordnance and buried wartime structures are not uncommon in areas near former military zones. Dr. Sabine Hartmann, a historian specializing in World War II fortifications, arrived on September 21st with a team of archaeologists and structural engineers. They carefully excavated around the concrete structure, revealing a reinforced bunker entrance with a steel door. The door bore manufacturing stamps, Kruppstahl 1944, German industrial markings. It was sealed but not locked. Corrosion had welded it partially shut, but with hydraulic tools, the team pried it open on September 23rd. Behind the door, a concrete staircase descended at a 30-degree angle into darkness. The team entered with lights, cameras, and safety equipment. The stairs led down 40 feet, ending in a corridor carved through solid rock and lined with reinforced concrete. The main chamber was remarkably preserved. Dry air, sealed environment, and stable temperature had prevented significant decay. The team found a main living area with a bed, desk, chair, and shelving. A kitchen area with a wood-burning stove, vented through a concealed chimney. A storage room filled with empty cans, crates, and supply containers. A workshop with tools, spare parts, and mechanical equipment. A small library with books, maps, and technical manuals. A latrine with a primitive septic system. A generator room with a diesel generator and fuel storage. Everything was covered in dust, but intact. It looked as though the occupant had simply walked out and never returned. The most significant discovery came in the main living area. The wooden desk contained a drawer that, when forced open, revealed a leather-bound journal. Dr. Hartmann carefully opened it. The first page read, "Private Journal of Standartenführer Eric von Strauss, 2nd Panzer Division des Reich. If found, this record will serve as testimony. I did not die in Hungary. I chose to survive." The journal contained 247 pages of handwritten entries dated from March 1945 through November 1952. It documented 7 years of underground existence. Dr. Hartmann immediately recognized the historical significance. She sealed the site, contacted German federal authorities, and initiated a full forensic investigation. The journal and bunker contents were transported to the Institute for Contemporary History in Munich on September 28, 2024. A joint investigative team formed, including German Federal Archives representatives, forensic document analysts, World War II military historians, engineering specialists, DNA experts. First priority, authenticating the journal. Was it genuinely written by Eric von Strauss or an elaborate hoax? Paper analysis using spectroscopy confirmed the journal was produced between 1944–1946, consistent with wartime German paper manufacturing. Ink analysis matched chemical signatures of German military-issue ink from the 1940s. Handwriting comparison was conclusive. German Federal Archives provided von Strauss's original military reports, letters to family, and personal documents from before 1945. Forensic document examiners compared letter formations, spacing, pressure patterns, and signature characteristics across 50 sample points. The match probability exceeded 99.2%. The journal was written by Eric von Strauss. Content analysis revealed the scope of his survival operation. The March 1945 entries described his arrival at the bunker, taking inventory of supplies, establishing daily routines, and monitoring news through a battery-powered radio. The journal documented daily food consumption and supply management, maintenance schedules for bunker systems, physical exercise routines to maintain health, mental exercises to combat isolation, radio monitoring of Allied broadcasts and German news, observations of the war's end and occupation, detailed plans for eventual emergence. Von Strauss had stocked the bunker with enough preserved food to last 3–5 years if rationed carefully. He supplemented this by making night trips to the surface during 1946–19 for 9 to forage, hunt, and steal supplies from nearby villages. His journal described these excursions in detail, including close calls with Allied patrols and German civilian police. He listened to radio broadcasts obsessively, tracking the war's end, the Nuremberg trials, the occupation, and the early Cold War. He recorded summaries of major events, analyzed political developments, and maintained hope that Germany would somehow rise again. But as years passed, his entries became more fatalistic. By 1950, he acknowledged Germany would not return to power. The bunker was becoming a tomb rather than a shelter. The final entry, dated November 14, 1952, read, "7 years underground. I have survived what I feared most. Germany is divided, occupied, and has accepted defeat. There is no future for me here. I will leave tomorrow. Where I go, this journal will not follow. If found, let it be known. Eric von Strauss did not surrender. He simply chose a different battle." After that, nothing. Artifact recovery began in October 2024. Forensic teams systematically cataloged everything in the bunker. What they found provided remarkable insight into von Strauss's 7-year exile. 247 empty cans of preserved meat, vegetables, and fruit, all German military rations dated 1943-1944. 18 empty 50 kg sacks of dried beans, rice, and grain. Empty containers of honey, salt, and preserves. Empty wine and schnapps bottles, 34 total. 3 SS uniforms in excellent condition, carefully stored. Civilian clothes dating from the 1940s. A shaving kit with straight razor and soap. A portable chest set with pieces carved from wood. A harmonica. Family photographs of his wife and children. 1 Walther P38 pistol with 200 rounds of ammunition. 1 Mauser Kar 98K rifle with 500 rounds. 6 stick grenades, carefully preserved. German military maps of Europe. Technical manuals for various weapons and equipment. A detailed map of Allied occupation zones. Newspaper clippings from 1940, 51951 collected during surface trips. A shortwave radio receiver with log of monitored broadcasts. Handwritten notes analyzing post-war German politics. 73 books, including German classics, philosophy, military history, and engineering texts. Several books on survival techniques and primitive living. Notebooks filled with calculations, engineering diagrams, and sketches. The bunker's construction itself was a marvel of engineering. Structural engineers determined von Strauss had designed the facility with remarkable sophistication. The ventilation system used natural thermal convection through concealed shafts. The water supply came from an underground spring tapped through a drilled well. The septic system drained into a natural cavern system below the bunker. The entrance was positioned to be invisible from above, covered with rock and vegetation. Emergency exits led to 2 concealed points 100 meters away. The facility could have sustained 1 person for a decade or more with careful management. DNA analysis provided final confirmation. In one of the storage rooms, investigators found a hairbrush with hair samples still attached. DNA extracted from those hairs was compared to samples obtained from von Strauss's living descendants. His granddaughter Emma von Strauss agreed to provide a comparison sample. The result, 99.8% match probability. The bunker had been occupied by Eric von Strauss. But the critical question remained: what happened to him after November 1952? German authorities launched an investigation to determine von Strauss's fate after he left the bunker in 1952. Immigration records, death certificates, and civil registries were searched. No Eric von Strauss matching his description appeared anywhere in German records after 1945. However, investigators found something intriguing in Argentine immigration records. In January 1953, a German immigrant named Erich Schmidt arrived in Buenos Aires. The physical description matched von Strauss: height 178 cm, brown hair, blue eyes, scar on left hand. Argentine authorities, cooperating with German investigators, searched for records of Erich Schmidt. They found immigration documents but no subsequent trace. Schmidt had entered Argentina legally, listed his occupation as engineer, and then vanished into the German immigrant community. Cross-referencing Buenos Aires records with known Nazi fugitive networks, investigators identified a pattern. Several former SS officers had used similar names, similar timing, and disappeared into German communities in Argentina, Brazil, and Paraguay during the early 1950s. A 2025 interview with Helmut Reinhard, now 94 years old, provided a crucial lead. Reinhard had been a German immigrant in Argentina during the 1950s. He recalled meeting a man in Buenos Aires in 1953 who went by Eric Schmidt but had the bearing of a military officer. Reinhard remembered, "He was quiet, kept to himself, but you could tell he'd seen combat. We didn't ask questions in those days. Many men had pasts they didn't discuss." Argentine investigators found property records showing an Eric Schmidt purchased a small farm in Bariloche, a German community in southern Argentina, in 1954. The property changed hands in 1967, sold by the estate of an Eric Schmidt who had died in 1966. German authorities requested exhumation from the Bariloche cemetery where Schmidt was buried. Argentine courts approved in March 2025. The exhumation took place on April 8, 2025. DNA analysis of the remains compared to von Strauss's descendants showed a 99.4% match probability. Eric von Strauss had lived in Argentina under the name Eric Schmidt from 1953 until his death in 1966 at age 58. He'd worked as a civil engineer, lived quietly, never married again, and died of heart failure. He was buried under his assumed name in a small cemetery overlooking the Andes Mountains. Based on forensic evidence, journal entries, and historical analysis, investigators reconstructed von Strauss's full story. Von Strauss fakes his death in Hungary, escapes westward, and reaches his pre-prepared bunker in Bavaria by March 1945. He remains underground during the war's final weeks, listening to radio broadcasts as Germany collapses and surrenders. He lives in the bunker, making occasional night surface trips for supplies and information. He monitors Allied occupation, follows Nuremberg trials, and hopes for German resurgence. He realizes Germany will not return to power. He begins planning to leave Europe permanently. He makes contact with escape networks helping former Nazis flee to South America. He abandons the bunker, taking only essential items and his accumulated gold reserves. He travels to Genoa, Italy, using forged documents. He boards a ship to Buenos Aires using the identity Eric Schmidt. He enters Argentina legally as a German immigrant engineer. He lives quietly in Bariloche, works as a civil engineer, and integrates into the German immigrant community. He never reveals his true identity. He dies in 1966, taking his secrets to the grave. The bunker remained sealed and forgotten until September 2024. The discovery devastated von Strauss's surviving family. His daughter Anna, now 84 years old, had believed her father died heroically in 1945. Learning he'd faked his death, abandoned his family, and lived for 21 years after the war destroyed the narrative she'd carried her entire life. In a November 2024 interview, she said, "I mourned him for 79 years. We visited memorials, honored his sacrifice, and told our children about their grandfather's bravery. Now I learn he was hiding in a hole while my mother struggled to feed us during occupation. He chose survival over his family." Von Strauss's widow, Margaret, had died in 1982, never knowing her husband had survived. She'd remarried in 1951 to a school teacher named Friedrich Dorn and lived a quiet life until her death. Von Strauss's grandchildren had mixed reactions. Some felt anger and betrayal. Others expressed sympathy for a man trapped by circumstance and ideology. Emma von Strauss, his granddaughter who provided DNA samples, told reporters, "I don't condone what he did. He served a criminal regime and abandoned his family. But I also understand he was terrified of what awaited captured SS officers. He made choices driven by fear and self-preservation. Whether those choices deserve condemnation or pity, I can't say. The von Strauss case revealed something historians had suspected, but never proven. Some Nazi officers successfully faked their deaths and lived in hiding for years before fleeing to South America. Unlike famous cases like Joseph Mengele or Adolf Eichmann, who fled immediately, von Strauss had waited 7 years, allowing the manhunt to cool before emerging with a new identity. His engineering skills had enabled something remarkable. A bunker so well designed it remained operational for 7 years with minimal maintenance and undetectable by Allied searches. The journal provided unprecedented insight into the psychological state of Nazi officers post-1945. Von Strauss's entries documented denial, rationalization, and slow acceptance of defeat. He'd clung to hope that Germany would rise again, that occupation was temporary, that his ideology would be vindicated. By 1950, his entries reflected despair and resignation. Germany was embracing democracy. Denazification was proceeding. The Cold War had shifted focus away from hunting low-level war criminals. He'd survived only to realize his world was gone forever. Dr. Sabine Hartmann, who led the bunker investigation, published her findings in 2025. She concluded, "Von Strauss represents a category of Nazi officers we've underestimated, those without war crimes charges but with enough fear and resources to vanish. He wasn't famous enough to be actively hunted, smart enough to plan meticulously, and patient enough to wait years before moving. How many others did the same? We may never know." Several aspects of the case remain unclear. Von Strauss's journal mentioned using gold reserves to finance his escape and buy his Argentine farm. He'd entered the bunker with approximately 50 kilograms of gold diverted from division funds. Where did the rest go? How much did he take to Argentina? Was any left in the bunker? Investigators found no gold in the bunker. Von Strauss either took it all or hid it elsewhere. Von Strauss couldn't have reached Argentina alone. He needed contacts, forged documents, and transportation. His journal mentions arrangements made through channels, but provides no details. Historians believe he contacted Odessa or similar Nazi escape networks, but he was careful never to record names or specific organizations. If von Strauss built one bunker, did other officers build similar facilities? Were there more hidden shelters in the Alps that remain undiscovered? German authorities launched surveys of regions with similar geological and historical conditions. As of 2025, no additional bunkers have been found, but the search continues. The von Strauss bunker is now a protected historical site. The Bavarian State Office for Monument Protection has secured it and is developing plans for controlled scholarly access. Alpine Resort Development AG abandoned their construction project. The company sold the land to the German government in March 2025. Plans for the ski resort were canceled. The bunker will be preserved as is, with limited public access for educational purposes. The journal has been digitized and will be published with scholarly annotation in 2026. Von Strauss's uniforms, weapons, and personal effects will be displayed at the Documentation Center Nazi Party Rally Grounds in Nuremberg, contextualized within exhibits about Nazi ideology and post-war justice. The von Strauss case raises uncomfortable questions. Was he a war criminal who escaped justice, or simply a soldier who avoided captivity? He'd served in the Waffen-SS, but investigations found no evidence he participated in atrocities. His division had combat record but wasn't linked to mass killings or genocide. Should he be condemned for abandoning his family? He left his wife and children to face occupation and poverty while he hid underground. Yet he also faced probable imprisonment or execution if captured. Did his 7 years in isolation constitute punishment enough? He'd lived in darkness, fear, and loneliness for nearly a decade. Some argue that was a prison of his own making. Others say he deserved formal trial and legal accountability. There are no easy answers. Eric von Strauss built one of World War II's most elaborate personal escapes. Through careful planning, engineering skill, and ruthless determination, he survived underground for 7 years, emerged with a new identity, and lived quietly until natural death. He succeeded where thousands of others failed. He avoided capture, trial, and imprisonment. He died free. Whether that deserves admiration or condemnation depends on your perspective. What's certain is this: he represented thousands of Nazi officers who vanished in 1945, and his bunker proved that some succeeded in ways we're only now discovering. The journal's final words remain haunting. Eric von Strauss did not surrender. He simply chose a different battle. Sometimes the mountains keep secrets for 79 years, and sometimes construction crews with excavators finally bring those secrets into light. The steel door that sealed his bunker is now on display in Munich, a reminder that history's mysteries don't always stay buried, and that the line between survival and betrayal, between soldier and fugitive, is thinner than we'd like to believe.